The Nevada sun began to set over the neon lights of Las Vegas, painting the sky with orange hues that contrasted with the artificial glow of the city that never sleeps. Isabella Martinez adjusted the black and gold uniform of Palazzo Royale, one of the most luxurious casinos on the Strip, and took a deep breath before starting her night shift. At 24, she carried on her shoulders the weight of responsibilities that many would only know decades later. "Bella, you're in the VIP section today," announced Marcos, the supervisor, handing her a silver tray. "The special clients arrived an hour ago. Be discreet and efficient." Isabella nodded, knowing exactly what special clients meant at Palazzo Royale. They weren't just high-rolling gamblers. They were men whose businesses extended far beyond poker tables and roulette wheels. Men who controlled territories, influences, and lives with the same ease they bet millions on a single hand. Walking through the velvet corridors leading to the VIP section, Isabella reflected on how her life had changed drastically in the past 2 years. Before the sudden death of her father, Roberto Martinez, in a construction accident, she was studying business administration at UNLV and dreamed of opening her own business. Now, she worked double shifts, mornings at a downtown cafe and nights at the casino, to maintain the house where she lived with her mother, Carmen, and her younger brother Diego, who was 16. The VIP section of Palazzo Royale was a world apart. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, illuminating mahogany tables where men in expensive suits played cards with the same seriousness of generals planning a war. The air was heavy with the aroma of Cuban cigars and decades-old Scotch whiskey, creating an atmosphere that whispered power and danger in equal measure. Isabella approached the main table, where 5 men were involved in a Texas Hold'em poker game. Their bets weren't measured in hundreds or thousands, but in properties, territories, and favors worth more than money. In the center of the table, golden chips stacked like small towers, each representing $50,000. "Gentlemen, may I offer something to drink?" asked Isabella, with the professional voice she had perfected over the months. 4 of the men barely looked up from their cards, murmuring requests for whiskey and cognac. But the 5th man, seated at the head of the table, watched her with an intensity that made Isabella feel a chill run down her spine. Dominic Romano was 32 years old and possessed the kind of presence that dominated any environment he entered. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his gray-blue eyes seemed capable of reading a person's most intimate thoughts. "You're new here," said Dominic, his voice carrying a slight accent that betrayed his Sicilian origins. It wasn't a question, but a statement made by someone accustomed to knowing everything and everyone in his territory. "I've been working here for 8 months, sir," Isabella replied, maintaining eye contact despite the nervousness she felt growing in her chest. "Romano," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Dominic Romano." Isabella hesitated for a moment. She knew who he was. Everyone in Las Vegas knew. Dominic Romano controlled much of the city's unofficial operations, from underground casinos to import businesses that never went through customs. His family had built an empire that extended from the West Coast to Chicago, and he was known both for his strategic intelligence and his ruthlessness with those who betrayed him. "Isabella Martinez," she replied, briefly shaking his hand. His skin was surprisingly smooth for someone who, according to rumors, had started his career on the streets of Boston. "Martinez," repeated Dominic, as if savoring the name. "Spanish? Mexican. My family came here when I was a child. And what is an educated young Mexican woman doing serving drinks to old Italians in a casino?" The question caught Isabella by surprise. It wasn't the type of conversation she expected to have with a client, especially one like Dominic Romano. "Paying the bills," she answered honestly, deciding that truth was safer than any elaborate lie. Dominic smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes but completely transformed his expression. "Honest, I like that." "Dom, are you going to play, or are we going to sit here all night listening to you flirt?" interrupted one of the other players, a corpulent man with a New York accent that Isabella recognized as Anthony Torino, Dominic's right-hand man. "Patience, Tony," replied Dominic, without taking his eyes off Isabella. Some things are worth savoring. Isabella felt her face warm, but maintained her professional composure. May I bring your drink, Mr. Romano? Macallan 25. No ice. As Isabella walked away to get the drink, she could feel Dominic's eyes following her every movement. There was something in the way he watched her that was different from the predatory gaze she had learned to recognize and avoid during her months working at the casino. It was more calculating, as if he were evaluating not just her appearance, but her value in some much larger game. At the VIP section bar, Isabella found Sarah, a veteran waitress who had worked at Palazzo Royale for more than 5 years. I saw you talking to Romano, said Sarah in a low voice, polishing a glass with nervous movements. Be careful, dear. That man isn't like the other rich clients who pass through here. What do you mean? Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening. He's not here just to gamble. Romano uses this place for business meetings, the kind of business that makes people disappear if they know too much. Isabella nodded, thanking her for the warning, but part of her already knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. There was an energy in the air around Dominic's table that was different from the other VIP tables. The men spoke in codes, their conversations punctuated by silences heavy with meaning. When she returned with the whiskey, the game had intensified. The chips in the center of the table now formed a golden mountain worth more than the house where Isabella had grown up. Dominic held his cards with the same tranquility of someone reading a newspaper, but Isabella noticed the almost imperceptible tension in his shoulders. Your drink, Mr. Romano, she said, placing the glass beside his right hand. Thank you, Isabella. The fact that he had remembered her name surprised her. In her experience, men like Dominic Romano rarely bothered to remember the names of people they considered irrelevant. The game continued for another 2 hours, with Isabella making regular trips to the bar to replenish drinks. During this time, she began to notice patterns in the men's conversations. They talked about territories and percentages, about problems that needed to be resolved and partnerships that needed to be renegotiated. These weren't conversations about legitimate business. It was during one of these trips to the bar that Isabella heard something that would change her life forever. The problem with Castellano needs to be resolved this week, said Anthony Torino, his voice low but clear enough for Isabella to hear as she passed by the table. He's becoming too ambitious, agreed another man. Thinks he can expand into our territory without consequences. Dominic remained silent for a moment, studying his cards. When he spoke, his voice had a coldness that made Isabella stop involuntarily. Castellano forgot that Las Vegas has rules that have existed for a long time and don't change because an ambitious young man decides he wants more than he deserves. How do you want to handle this? Asked Torino. The traditional way, replied Dominic, placing his cards on the table. Full house, kings over queens. The other players grumbled, throwing their defeated cards on the table. Dominic collected the chips with precise movements. But Isabella knew the conversation about Castellano hadn't ended with the poker hand. Isabella, called Dominic, making her turn around. Could you bring a bottle of champagne? Dom Perignon 2008 if you have it. Of course, Mr. Romano. As Isabella headed to the bar, her mind processed what she had heard. She knew she should forget the conversation, pretend she hadn't understood the implications behind the carefully chosen words. But part of her, the part that had inherited her father's stubbornness, couldn't simply ignore what seemed to be the planning of something terrible. Roberto Martinez had taught his daughter that some things in life were worth more than personal safety. Justice was one of them. He had spent years fighting for better working conditions for construction workers, even when it meant confronting powerful and potentially dangerous businessmen. Mija, he used to say, when you see something wrong happening and do nothing, you become part of the problem. Isabella grabbed the champagne bottle and returned to the table, where the men were now openly discussing the details of their plans. Apparently, the poker victory had left Dominic more relaxed, or perhaps he simply didn't care if a waitress heard his conversations. Castellano will be at the warehouse on Thursday, said Torino, consulting a phone. Meeting with the port suppliers. Perfect, replied Dominic. 2 birds with 1 stone. Isabella felt her stomach contract. She didn't need to be an expert in organized crime to understand they were planning something violent, and now she knew when and where it would happen. While serving the champagne, Isabella struggled with a moral dilemma that seemed to have no right solution. If she went to the police, she would be putting her family in danger. Men like Dominic Romano had eyes and ears everywhere, including in the police department. But if she did nothing, innocent people could die. Isabella, said Dominic suddenly, making her spill a few drops of champagne on the table. Are you all right? You seem distracted. Sorry, Mr. Romano. Just a little tired. Dominic studied her for a long moment, his gray-blue eyes seeming to penetrate her soul. Perhaps you should go home early today. We don't want our favorite employees to burn out. The way he said favorite employees made Isabella realize she had attracted more attention than she intended. Thank you for the consideration, but I'm fine. I insist, said Dominic, his voice maintaining the polite tone, but with a firmness that brooked no discussion. Tony, make sure Miss Martinez gets home safely. Isabella felt panic growing in her chest. Really, it's not necessary. I have my own car. Las Vegas can be dangerous at night for a young woman alone, replied Dominic, rising from the table. He was taller than Isabella had realized, easily 6'5", with broad shoulders that perfectly filled his Italian suit, especially for someone who may have heard things she shouldn't have heard. Isabella's blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow, Dominic Romano had realized she was paying attention to his conversations. I didn't hear anything, Mr. Romano, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I was just doing my job. Dominic approached her, stopping just inches away. Isabella could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scent of whiskey and power. When he spoke, his voice was low enough for only her to hear. Isabella Martinez, daughter of Roberto Martinez, who died 2 years ago in a construction accident, lives on Elm Street with her mother Carmen and her younger brother Diego, 16 years old. Studies business administration at UNLV, but had to drop out to work. Has 2 overdue mortgages and an unpaid medical bill from her mother's last hospitalization. Isabella felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. How did he know all this? And more importantly, what did he intend to do with this information? How did you... I know many things, Isabella. It's part of my business to know about people who enter my life. Dominic paused, studying her expression. The question now is, what are we going to do with you? Isabella swallowed hard, fighting to maintain her composure. I won't cause problems, Mr. Romano. I just want to work and take care of my family. I believe you, said Dominic, surprising her. But unfortunately, things aren't that simple. You heard a conversation that could be misinterpreted by certain people. That creates a problem for me. I can forget everything I heard, said Isabella quickly. I can even quit, if necessary. Dominic smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. Oh, my dear Isabella, do you really think it's that easy? That you can simply walk out of my life after knowing what you know? Isabella realized she had gotten herself into something much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Dominic Romano wasn't just a rich client with questionable business. He was a man who controlled lives and destinies with the same ease he had controlled that poker game. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. Dominic stepped back slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on hers. For now, I want you to continue doing exactly what you were doing. Work, take care of your family, live your life. But remember that now you're part of my world, Isabella. And in my world, loyalty is everything. And if I don't want to be part of your world? The question came out before Isabella could control herself. She saw something change in Dominic's expression, a hardness that wasn't there before. Then you'll discover that some choices aren't really choices, he replied. Tony will escort you home today. Tomorrow you'll return to work as if nothing happened. And Isabella? Yes? Don't do anything stupid. Your family depends on your smart decisions. With those words, Dominic Romano turned and returned to the poker table, leaving Isabella alone with the terrifying realization that her life had changed forever in a single night. She was no longer just a waitress struggling to support her family. Now she was a piece in a much more dangerous game. controlled by a man who seemed capable of anything. As Anthony Torino approached to escort her home, Isabella looked one last time at Dominic Romano. He had resumed his poker game as if nothing had happened, but she could feel that he was aware of her every movement, even without looking in her direction. The walk to the parking lot was made in silence, with Torino maintaining a respectful but vigilant distance. Isabella knew it wasn't protection, it was supervision. Dominic Romano had made it clear that she was now under his observation, and any false move would have consequences not just for her, but for her family. As she drove through the illuminated streets of Las Vegas toward her modest neighborhood, Isabella tried to process everything that had happened. In a few hours, she had gone from an anonymous waitress to someone who possessed dangerous information about one of the city's most powerful men. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she was connected to Dominic Romano in a way that seemed to have no return. What she didn't know was that this night was just the beginning of a journey that would test not only her courage and intelligence, but also her ability to survive in a world where rules were written in blood and loyalty was measured in life and death. As she parked in front of her house, Isabella looked at the illuminated windows where her mother was probably watching television and her brother doing homework. They had no idea that their lives had also changed that night, that they were now under the shadow of a man whose power extended far beyond the casinos and streets of Las Vegas. Isabella took a deep breath and got out of the car, knowing that from that moment on, every decision she made would have consequences she could barely imagine. Dominic Romano had entered her life like a storm, and she still didn't know if she would survive the hurricane that was to come. 3 days had passed since the encounter at Palazzo Royale, and Isabella felt as if she were living in a parallel reality. During the day, she maintained her normal routine, working at the cafe in the morning, taking care of household chores in the afternoon, and trying to study for the exams she had missed when she dropped out of school. But at night, when she arrived at the casino, she could feel invisible eyes following her every movement. Dominic Romano hadn't appeared at Palazzo Royale since that night, but his presence was felt in every corner of the establishment. The other employees treated her with a subtle deference that didn't exist before, and Marcus, the supervisor, had suddenly become much more attentive to her needs. Isabella knew the word had spread. She was under the protection or surveillance of Dominic Romano. On Thursday night, Isabella found herself serving in the main section of the casino, away from the VIP games. She had hoped this would mean a quiet night, but she couldn't get the conversation she had heard about Castellano and the warehouse out of her mind. According to what she had heard, something was supposed to happen that night, and guilt was eating at her stomach like acid. "Bella, are you okay?" asked Maria, a fellow waitress who worked at the next table. "You seem distant." "Just tired," Isabella lied, forcing a smile. "Too many work hours." Maria nodded understandingly. All the waitresses at Palazzo Royale knew the pressure of working double shifts to survive in a city where the cost of living was high and opportunities for people without connections were limited. At 10:30 at night, Isabella was cleaning a table when she saw Anthony Torino enter the casino. He wasn't dressed in his usual suit, but in dark casual clothes that made him look more like a tourist than a Mafia member. His eyes scanned the environment until they found Isabella, and he nodded discreetly before heading to one of the blackjack tables. Isabella felt her heart race. Torino's presence at the casino that specific night couldn't be a coincidence. It meant that the plans she had heard were being executed, and that Dominic Romano was using Palazzo Royale as his alibi. 20 minutes later, Dominic arrived. He entered through the main entrance like any regular customer, greeting the reception staff with the familiarity of someone who had frequented the establishment for years. He was dressed in a navy blue suit that cost more than Isabella's annual salary, and carried with him that aura of controlled power that made people instinctively step aside to clear the way. Isabella watched as he headed directly to the VIP poker table, where other players were already waiting. It was a carefully orchestrated performance. Dominic Romano was establishing his presence at the casino exactly at the moment when, according to the plans she had heard, something terrible was happening elsewhere in the city. "Isabella," called Marcos, appearing beside her with a tray. "Mr. Romano specifically requested you for the VIP section today." Isabella took the tray with slightly trembling hands. Of course, as she walked toward the VIP section, Isabella struggled with a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her was terrified at the idea of facing Dominic again, knowing what she knew, but another part, the part that had inherited her father's stubborn courage, was furious. If her suspicions were correct, Dominic was using his presence at the casino to cover up a crime, and she was being forced to be a silent accomplice. The VIP section was less busy than the previous night. Only one table was occupied, and Dominic was seated in his usual position, playing an apparently casual poker game with 3 other men Isabella didn't recognize. They seemed more relaxed than Dominic's usual associates, laughing and talking about sports and legitimate business. "Isabella," said Dominic when she approached, his face lighting up with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Good to see you again. How have you been?" "Well, thank you, Mr. Romano," she replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the tension she felt. "Please call me Dominic. We're old friends now, aren't we?" Isabella forced a smile. "What can I bring you tonight?" "The same as always for me," said Dominic. "And gentlemen?" While taking the other players' orders, Isabella noticed that Dominic discreetly checked his watch. It was exactly 11:15 at night. She wondered if this time had any specific significance in the plans she had heard. When she returned with the drinks, the conversation at the table had become more animated. The men were discussing an investment in a new resort that would be built off the strip, and Dominic participated in the conversation with the enthusiasm of a legitimate businessman. It was an impressive performance, and Isabella realized she was seeing a master at work, someone capable of maintaining multiple personas depending on the situation. "Isabella," said Dominic during a pause in the conversation, "you mentioned that you study business administration. What do you think of the project we're discussing?" The question caught her by surprise. "I don't have enough experience to give an opinion on investments of this magnitude, sir." "Dominic, modesty is an admirable quality," he replied, "but so is intelligence, and I have the impression that you possess both." One of the other players, an older man with graying hair, looked at Isabella with renewed interest. "Romano, you have an excellent eye for talent. This young woman has something special." Isabella felt her face warm with the attention, but also realized she was being evaluated in a way that went beyond her capacity as a waitress. Dominic was presenting her to these men for some specific reason. The night continued with Isabella making regular trips between the table and the bar, always conscious that Dominic was watching her movements with discreet attention. Around midnight, she noticed that Anthony Torino had disappeared from the casino, and Dominic began checking his phone more frequently. It was at 12:45 that everything changed. Isabella was returning from the bar when she heard Dominic tell the other players, "Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, but I have an early appointment tomorrow." The men said goodbye cordially, and in a few minutes the VIP section was empty except for Dominic and Isabella. He remained seated at the table, studying the cards he had left face down, as if contemplating an important decision. "Sit down," he said finally, indicating the chair next to his. Isabella hesitated. "I should get back to work." "Sit down, Isabella." This time it wasn't a request. Isabella sat down, keeping her hands crossed in her lap to hide the trembling. Dominic watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You've been thinking about our conversation the other night," he said. It wasn't a question. "I said I would forget everything, and I believe you tried. But some things are hard to forget, especially for someone with your moral conscience." Isabella looked up to meet his. "What do you mean?" Dominic leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Your father was known for his integrity, Isabella. Roberto Martinez never accepted bribes, never turned a blind eye to safety violations, even when it meant confronting powerful people. You inherited that characteristic from him." "How do you know about my father?" "I know many things. For example, I know you're wondering if you should have done something with the information you heard the other night." Isabella felt as if he could read her thoughts. "I didn't. Don't lie to me, Isabella. We both know you're too intelligent to simply ignore what you heard." Isabella took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was her only option. You're right. I have been thinking about it. And what did you conclude? That I don't want to know anything about this. That I just want to work and take care of my family. Dominic smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes that Isabella didn't expect to see. Unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. Sometimes knowledge chooses us, not the other way around. At that moment, Dominic's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and his expression became more serious. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, answering the call. "Yes?" Isabella couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she saw Dominic's expression change subtly. His eyes narrowed and his jaw contracted almost imperceptibly. "I understand," he said finally. "Take care of the details. We'll talk tomorrow." When he hung up, Dominic remained silent for a moment, looking at the phone as if it contained the answers to all the world's problems. "Bad news?" asked Isabella, immediately regretting the question. Dominic looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Depends on the perspective. For some people, it's excellent news. For others," he paused, "well, they won't care anymore." Isabella felt a chill in her stomach. She knew, without a shadow of doubt, that the call was related to the plans she had heard. Something had happened to Castellano. "Isabella," said Dominic, his voice taking on a more formal tone, "I need you to understand something. The world I live in has very specific rules. Rules that exist to maintain order and protect those who respect the system, and those who don't respect it learn the hard way that some lessons are permanent." Isabella swallowed hard. "What does this have to do with me?" Dominic got up and walked to the window overlooking the strip. The neon lights painted his face with alternating colors of red and blue, creating an almost cinematic image. "You heard a conversation you shouldn't have heard. That creates a problem for me, but also an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Dominic turned to face her. "You're intelligent, educated, and have solid moral principles. You're also beautiful and have a natural presence that makes people trust you. These are valuable qualities in my world." Isabella felt a chill of fear. "I don't want to be part of your world." "But you already are, dear. From the moment you heard that conversation, you became a piece on the board. The question now is what kind of piece you're going to be. And if I refuse?" Dominic returned to the table and sat down again, this time closer to Isabella. "Then you'll discover that refusing isn't really an option, not when it comes to your family's safety." The veiled threat made Isabella straighten in her chair. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being realistic. Isabella, you live in a world where you think you can simply ignore certain realities and they'll disappear. But I live in the real world, where actions have consequences and knowledge has a price." "What price?" Dominic reached out and gently touched Isabella's face, making her recoil involuntarily. "Loyalty, commitment, and eventually, much more than that." Isabella pulled away from his touch. "I don't understand what you want from me. For now, I want you to continue doing exactly what you're doing. Work, study, take care of your family. But I also want you to start preparing for a bigger role in my organization." "What kind of role?" Dominic smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "I'm still deciding, but I have the impression that you have potential for much more than serving drinks." Isabella felt as if she were being sucked into a whirlpool from which she couldn't escape. "And if I don't want that role? Then you'll discover that sometimes our choices are made for us." Dominic stood up and adjusted his jacket. "Isabella, I'm going to be very clear with you. You now know things that could cause me significant problems if they reached the wrong people. That means you're both an asset and a liability to me." "A liability?" "Someone who needs to be managed, cared for, protected." He paused significantly. "Or eliminated if necessary." Isabella's blood ran cold. "Would you kill me?" "I would do whatever was necessary to protect my family and my business. But I much prefer the first option. You're too intelligent to waste." Isabella stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. "I need to go." "Of course. But Isabella," she turned to look at him, "tomorrow night I want you to have dinner with me. There are some people I'd like you to meet. And if I refuse?" Dominic walked up to her, stopping so close that Isabella could feel the heat of his body. "Then I'll have to reconsider our partnership. And that would be a shame, because I really like you." Isabella knew she had no choice. Where? My driver will pick you up at 7. Wear something beautiful. As Isabella left the VIP section, her mind was in turmoil. In less than a week, her life had completely transformed. She was no longer a waitress struggling to survive. Now she was a golden prisoner of a man who controlled lives and destinies with the same ease he played cards. But as she walked through the corridors of Palazzo Royale, Isabella made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't be just a passive victim of circumstances. If Dominic Romano wanted to throw her into his dangerous world, she would learn the rules and find a way to win. What she didn't know was that Dominic Romano had built his reputation precisely by always being one step ahead of his adversaries. And now, he had decided that Isabella Martinez would be much more than just a piece in his game. She would be his queen. As Isabella drove home that night, she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. Tomorrow's dinner would be just the beginning of a journey that would take her to the heart of Dominic Romano's empire, where she would discover that power had a price, and sometimes that price was paid with one's own heart. Isabella spent all of Friday in a state of growing anxiety. She had tried to convince herself that she could simply not show up for dinner, but she knew that Dominic Romano wasn't the type of man who accepted being ignored. Besides, his words about reconsidering the partnership echoed in her mind like a veiled threat to her family's safety. During her morning shift at the cafe, Isabella was so distracted that she spilled coffee on 2 customers and forgot 3 orders. Her boss, a kind man named Eduardo, who had known her father, dismissed her early with the suggestion that she rest. "Mija, you're not well today," said Eduardo, his graying eyebrows furrowed with concern. "Go home, take care of yourself." Isabella thanked him and left the cafe. But instead of going home, she drove to the cemetery where her father was buried. It was a small, modest place on the outskirts of Las Vegas, far from the glitter and ostentation of the Strip. She knelt in front of the simple gray granite headstone that read, "Roberto Martinez, beloved father and man of principles." "Papa," she whispered, touching the cold stone, "I don't know what to do. You always said to do the right thing. But what if the right thing puts our family in danger?" The desert wind blew through the cypresses, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of a distant storm. Isabella closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her father would say if he were there. Roberto Martinez had been a man of strong convictions, but also a practical man who understood that sometimes survival required difficult compromises. When she got home, Isabella found her mother, Carmen, in the kitchen preparing lunch. Carmen Martinez was a small, strong woman with dark hair beginning to show silver strands and brown eyes that seemed capable of seeing through any lie. She had worked as a nurse for 20 years before health problems forced her to retire early. "Bella, good that you came home early," said Carmen, looking at her daughter with maternal attention. "You've seemed tense lately. Is everything okay at work?" Isabella hesitated. She had always been close to her mother, but how could she explain that she had accidentally gotten involved with the Las Vegas Mafia? "Just too much work, Mama. Nothing I can't handle." Carmen didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. "Your brother is at school, but he said he needs to talk to you when he gets back." "Something about a scholarship opportunity?" Isabella nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. Diego was a brilliant student with dreams of becoming an engineer, but the family's financial difficulties had limited his options. If she could find a way to use her situation with Dominic Romano to benefit her family. The afternoon passed slowly, with Isabella trying to concentrate on household tasks, while her mind constantly returned to the dinner that awaited her. At 5 o'clock, she finally went up to her room to get ready. Isabella opened her modest wardrobe and sighed. Most of her clothes were work uniforms or casual clothes bought on sale. She had only 2 dresses that could be considered appropriate for an elegant dinner, a simple black one she had bought for her father's funeral, and a navy blue one she had worn to high school graduation. She chose the navy blue dress, which enhanced her dark eyes and complemented her skin tone. It was simple but elegant, with a cut that suggested sophistication without being provocative. Isabella applied discreet makeup and pulled her long hair into a low bun. leaving some strands loose to frame her face. When she looked in the mirror, Isabella barely recognized the woman staring back at her. There was a determination in her eyes that wasn't there before, a strength that had been born from the necessity of surviving in impossible circumstances. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black limousine stopped in front of the Martinez house. Isabella kissed her mother and said she was going out to dinner with work colleagues, a half-truth that made her feel guilty. When she left the house, she saw the neighborhood curtains move discreetly. A limousine in her modest neighborhood was an event that would be talked about for weeks. The driver was a middle-aged man with a professional appearance who greeted her politely and opened the rear door for her. The interior of the limousine was luxurious beyond anything Isabella had experienced. Soft leather, full bar, and even a small television. During the trip through Las Vegas, Isabella watched the city pass by the dark window. They left her modest neighborhood and headed toward the more exclusive areas of the city, where mansions hid behind high walls and wrought iron gates. The limousine finally stopped in front of a restaurant that Isabella recognized from the newspapers. Le Bernardin Vegas, an exclusive French establishment that required reservations months in advance and where a meal cost more than her weekly salary. Dominic Romano was waiting at the entrance, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that seemed to have been made specifically for him. When he saw Isabella get out of the limousine, his face lit up with a genuine smile of approval. "Isabella," he said, offering his arm. "You look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, accepting his arm and trying to ignore the way his touch sent waves of heat through her body. The interior of Le Bernardin was a work of art in itself. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, illuminating tables covered with white linen tablecloths and decorated with floral arrangements that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent. The maitre d' greeted them by Dominic's name and led them to a private table in an isolated corner of the restaurant. "I hope you like seafood," said Dominic as they sat down. "The chef here is considered one of the best in the world." Isabella looked at the menu and felt her eyes widen at the prices. "Everything seems expensive." Dominic laughed, a rich and genuine sound. "Isabella, you don't need to worry about money when you're with me. Never." The way he said it, with absolute certainty and almost possessively, made Isabella feel simultaneously protected and imprisoned. The sommelier appeared with a bottle of champagne that Dominic had apparently ordered in advance. "Dom Perignon 2008, announced the man, serving the champagne in crystal glasses that reflected the light of the chandeliers like small diamonds. "A toast," said Dominic, raising his glass. "To new beginnings." Isabella hesitated before touching her glass to his. "What kind of new beginnings?" "That depends on you," he replied, his gray-blue eyes studying her expression. "But first, let's dine. Business can wait." The meal was a sensory experience that Isabella had never imagined. Each dish was a work of art, presented with precision that bordered on perfection. Dominic proved to be a surprisingly engaging dinner companion, talking about art, literature, and travel with an erudition that contrasted with his dangerous reputation. "Have you ever been to Europe?" he asked, while they savored the main course, sole with champagne sauce that literally melted in the mouth. "I've never left Nevada," admitted Isabella. "I've barely had the opportunity to see other states." "That's a shame. There's so much world to see, so much beauty to experience." Dominic paused, delicately cutting his fish. "Maybe one day I can show you Paris. The city is magical in autumn." Isabella felt a shiver imagining herself walking the streets of Paris alongside Dominic Romano. It was a dangerous fantasy, because part of her really wanted to experience this world of luxury and sophistication that he represented. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. "Doing what? Treating me like I'm someone important. I'm just a waitress who heard something she shouldn't have heard." Dominic put his utensils aside and leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Isabella, you really don't see it, do you?" "See what?" "Your potential, your strength, the way you carry the responsibility of your family on your shoulders without complaining, the dignity with which you face difficulties that would break weaker people." He paused. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My mother. She was also a strong woman who did what was necessary to protect her family. Isabella felt something move in her chest, a dangerous emotion she didn't want to name. What happened to her? Dominic's expression hardened slightly. She died when I was 16, cancer. Could have been treated if we'd had money for the best doctors, but he shrugged. Sometimes life teaches us hard lessons about the value of power. Is that why you do what you do? Partially, but also because it's who I am. My father built an empire and I expanded it. It's my legacy, my responsibility. Isabella took a sip of champagne, feeling the drink warm her chest. And where do I fit into this? Dominic smiled, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her feel like prey being studied by a predator. That's an excellent question, and the answer depends on how brave you're willing to be. Before Isabella could respond, 3 men approached the table. She immediately recognized them as the players who had been with Dominic the night before at the casino. The older man with graying hair, who had commented on her talents, was in front. "Dominic," said the man, extending his hand. "Thank you for inviting us." "Vincent Caruso," said Dominic, standing up to greet the men. "Isabella, I'd like you to meet some associates of mine." Isabella stood politely while Dominic made the introductions. Vincent Caruso was apparently an investment consultant who worked with special clients. The other 2 men, Michael Torino, Anthony's brother, and James Benedetto, were introduced as business partners. "Miss Martinez," said Vincent, kissing her hand in an old-fashioned way. "Dominic has told us a lot about you." "I hope good things," replied Isabella, trying to keep her tone light despite her growing nervousness. "Only the best," assured Vincent. "He told us you have a background in business administration." "I'm studying, yes, although I've had to temporarily drop out." "What a shame," said Michael Torino. "Education is so important in modern business." Isabella realized she was being evaluated again, as if these men were considering her for some kind of position. The realization made her feel simultaneously flattered and terrified. "Please sit down," said Dominic, indicating the chairs that had been added to the table. "We were just discussing future opportunities." During the next hour, Isabella found herself at the center of a conversation that skillfully danced between legitimate business and activities that clearly weren't. The men talked about investments in casinos, partnerships with labor unions, and expansion opportunities in other states. But Isabella wasn't naive. She could read between the lines and understand that she was being presented with a sanitized version of Dominic Romano's criminal empire. These men weren't just businessmen. They were lieutenants of an organization that controlled territories, influences, and lives through methods that the law didn't recognize. "Isabella," said Vincent during a pause in the conversation, "Dominic told us you have an analytical mind. What do you think of our enterprises?" Isabella felt all eyes at the table turned to her. It was clearly a test, and her answer would determine how these men would see her from then on. "They seem to be very well-organized operations," she said carefully, "with clear command structures and intelligent risk diversification." Vincent smiled, clearly impressed. "See, I told you she was special. The question," said Dominic, his eyes fixed on Isabella, "is whether she's interested in being part of these operations." Isabella felt as if she was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong word and she could fall into an abyss from which she could never escape. But part of her, the part that was tired of fighting just to survive, was curious about what this world could offer. "What kind of role do you have in mind?" she asked, surprising herself with her own courage. "Initially," said Dominic, "something that would take advantage of your education and interpersonal skills, maybe helping to manage some of our more legitimate investments." And eventually, Dominic exchanged glances with the other men before answering. "Eventually, who knows? The sky's the limit for someone with your intelligence and determination." Isabella knew she was being seduced, not just by Dominic, but by the entire world he represented. A world where she wouldn't need to work double shifts just to pay the bills, where her family would have financial security, where she could finish her studies and have opportunities she had never dreamed of. But she also knew that all of this would come with a price. And as she looked at the faces of the men around the table, men who smiled politely while discussing activities that could destroy lives. Isabella wondered if she was willing to pay that price. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," replied Dominic, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he already knew what her answer would be. "Take all the time you need. But remember, Isabella, opportunities like this don't come every day." As the night continued, Isabella found herself being gradually accepted into the inner circle of these powerful men. They treated her with respect and deference, including her in conversations about strategy and planning. It was intoxicating to feel valued and heard after months of being treated as invisible. But when dinner finally ended and Dominic accompanied her back to the limousine, Isabella knew she had crossed a line from which there might be no return. She was no longer just an accidental witness. Now she was an active participant, even if reluctant, in Dominic Romano's world. "Thank you for dinner," she said, as the limousine headed back to her neighborhood. "It was enlightening." "It was just the beginning," replied Dominic, his hand finding hers on the leather seat. "Isabella, I want you to know that everything I offered today is real. You can have a better life. Your family can have security. All you need to do is trust me." Isabella looked at their intertwined hands, hers small and calloused from work, his strong and adorned with a gold ring that probably cost more than her car. "And if I can't do that? Trust you?" Dominic lifted her hand and gently kissed her fingers. "Then you'll discover that sometimes trust is a luxury we can't afford not to have." When the limousine stopped in front of her house, Isabella knew her life had changed irrevocably. She had tasted Dominic Romano's world, and now she would have to decide if she was willing to pay the price to remain in it. As she walked to her door, Isabella could feel Dominic's eyes following her through the dark window of the limousine. She knew he would wait for her answer, and that this answer would determine not only her future, but her family's future. What she didn't know was that Dominic Romano had already made his decision. Isabella Martinez would be his one way or another, and he was willing to use all the resources at his disposal to ensure that happened. Isabella spent the weekend in a state of emotional turbulence she had never experienced before. The dinner at Le Bernardin had opened her eyes to a world of possibilities she had never imagined, but it had also made it clear that accepting Dominic Romano's offer would mean entering territory from which there might be no return. On Saturday morning, she tried to maintain her normal routine, helping her mother with household chores and reviewing the family's bills. But when she opened the mail, Isabella found something that made her heart stop. A letter from the university informing her that her partial scholarship had been canceled due to budget restructuring. Without this financial aid, it would be impossible for her to resume her studies. "Bad news?" asked Carmen, noticing the devastated expression on her daughter's face. Isabella quickly folded the letter. "Nothing important, Mama." But Carmen Martinez hadn't raised 2 children without developing a 6th sense for problems. "Bella, you've been strange since Friday. What's happening?" Before Isabella could answer, Diego entered the kitchen with an animated expression that contrasted dramatically with his sister's somber mood. "Bella, you won't believe this," he said, throwing his backpack on the floor. "The school counselor said I can apply for a full scholarship to MIT if I keep my grades high." "MIT, Bella, can you imagine?" Isabella forced a smile, trying to hide the pain she felt seeing her brother's bright dreams. How could she tell him that the family could barely pay basic bills, let alone fund an education at one of the country's most expensive universities? "That's wonderful, Diego," she said, hugging her brother. "You deserve all the opportunities in the world." But while hugging Diego, Isabella couldn't stop thinking about Dominic Romano's offer. With his resources, Diego could not only go to MIT, but to any university he wanted. Her mother could have the best medical care. They could leave that neighborhood and live with dignity. All she needed to do was sell her soul. On Sunday, Isabella decided to go to church for the first time in months. St. Michael's Church was small and modest, serving mainly the Latino community in the neighborhood. Father Martinez, no relation despite the surname, was a gentle man who had known her family for years. During Mass, Isabella found herself praying for guidance, asking God to show her the right path. But when the priest spoke about temptation and moral choices in his sermon, Isabella felt as if he were speaking directly to her. After the service, Father Martinez approached her in the church courtyard. "Isabella, good to see you again," he said, his calloused hands holding hers with paternal affection. "How have you been?" "Well, Father, just facing some difficult decisions." The priest studied her with wise eyes that had seen many souls in conflict. "Sometimes, my daughter, the most difficult decisions are those that test not only our courage, but our fundamental values. And if values conflict, what if doing the right thing for one person means doing the wrong thing for another?" "That's a question many face," replied the priest. "But remember, Isabella, God never gives us burdens greater than we can bear. And sometimes, what seems to be the easiest path is actually the most dangerous for our soul." Isabella nodded, but the priest's words offered little comfort. She knew he was right in theory, but theory didn't pay bills or offer opportunities for her family. On Monday night, Isabella was working at Palazzo Royale when Marcus approached her with a strange expression. "Bella, you have a call in the office," he said. "Someone important." Isabella felt her stomach contract. She knew who was calling before she even answered the phone. "Isabella," said Dominic Romano's familiar voice. "I hope you had a good weekend." "It was quiet," she replied, conscious that Marcus was pretending not to listen to the conversation while organizing papers at the nearby desk. "Great. I'd like to see you tonight. There's something I need to discuss with you." "I'm working late. I've already spoken with management. You're released for the rest of the night." Isabella realized that Dominic had again demonstrated the reach of his influence. He could alter her work schedule with a simple phone call. "Where?" she asked, knowing she had no choice. "My office. My driver will be waiting for you at the employee exit in 20 minutes. The call ended before Isabella could respond. She stood there for a moment, holding the phone and trying to process what was happening. Dominic Romano was summoning her as if she were one of his employees, and the most disturbing thing was that she was obeying. 20 minutes later, Isabella found herself in the back seat of a black Mercedes, heading to a part of Las Vegas she had never visited. The driver, a different man from Friday's limousine, drove in silence through streets that became progressively more exclusive. Dominic Romano's office was on the top floor of a glass and steel building in the city's financial district. The elevator that took her there required a special card to access the floor, and Isabella noticed security cameras in every corner. The elevator doors opened directly into an office that seemed to have come out of an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Las Vegas, with the Strip shining like a terrestrial constellation. Italian leather furniture and artwork that Isabella suspected were originals completed an environment that whispered power and wealth. Dominic was standing in front of the windows, hands crossed behind his back, observing the city he helped control. He was dressed more casually than usual, dark pants and a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, revealing muscular forearms that suggested he hadn't always lived behind a desk. "Isabella," he said without turning around, "thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much choice." Dominic turned around, a smile playing on his lips. "There are always choices, dear. Some are just more obvious than others." Isabella looked around the office, noticing details that revealed more about the man who owned it. There were photographs in silver frames, an older woman who must be his mother, a stern-looking man who was probably his father, and several photos of Dominic with men Isabella recognized from newspapers as powerful figures in politics and business. "Impressive," she said. "I built all this from scratch," replied Dominic, following her gaze. "Well, almost from scratch. My father left me a solid foundation, but I expanded it beyond his most ambitious dreams." "And the price?" Dominic looked at her with curiosity. "What price?" "To build all this. It must have cost more than money." Dominic walked to an elaborate bar in the corner of the office and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "You're very perceptive, Isabella. Yes, it cost more than money. It cost relationships, sleep, and sometimes pieces of my soul." He offered her a glass, but Isabella hesitated. "I don't drink much." "Tonight you're going to need it," he said, pressing the glass into her hand. Isabella took a small sip, feeling the whiskey burn her throat. "Why am I here, Dominic?" Because it's time for you to make a decision. Dominic walked to his desk, a massive mahogany piece that dominated one side of the office, and picked up a leather folder. I have a proposal for you, Isabella. One that will change your life and your family's life forever. Isabella felt her heart race. What kind of proposal? Sit down, he said, indicating a leather chair in front of the desk. Isabella sat down, aware that Dominic was assuming a position of power behind the desk. It was a deliberate psychological tactic, and she wondered how many other people had sat in that same chair to receive offers they couldn't refuse. Isabella, began Dominic, opening the folder. You have something I need, and I have something you need. It's the foundation of all good business. What do you think I have that you need? Intelligence, education, an appearance that opens doors, and most importantly, you saw me in a vulnerable moment and chose not to betray me. That's worth more than gold in my world. Isabella took another sip of whiskey, feeling it warm her chest. And what do you have that I need? Dominic smiled and removed several documents from the folder. Financial security for your family, a complete education for you and your brother, first-class medical care for your mother, and opportunities you never dreamed of having. He slid the first documents across the desk. Isabella picked them up with trembling hands and felt her eyes widen as she read. The first document was a check for $500,000 made out to Carmen Martinez. The second was an acceptance letter from UNLV informing Isabella that she had received a full scholarship to complete her studies. The third was a letter from MIT offering Diego a complete 4-year scholarship. How did you? Isabella began, but her voice failed. I have influence in many places, replied Dominic simply. The university was happy to discover additional funds for deserving students. MIT was impressed with Diego's grades when one of my associates presented them to the admissions committee. Isabella looked at the documents, feeling tears form in her eyes. It was everything she had dreamed of for her family, everything she had worked to achieve, presented to her on a silver platter. What's the price? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic stood up and walked around the desk, stopping beside her chair. You! Isabella looked up to meet his eyes. I don't understand. Marry me, Isabella. The words fell between them like a bomb. Isabella felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. What? Marry me, repeated Dominic, his voice calm and controlled, as if he were discussing the weather. Be my wife, my partner, my queen. Isabella stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. You're crazy? We barely know each other. We know enough, replied Dominic. You're intelligent, strong, and have moral principles I admire. I can offer you a life that most women only dream of having. And you? What do you gain from this? Dominic walked back to the windows, looking at the city below. Legitimacy, stability, a wife who can accompany me to social events and business without embarrassing me, and perhaps eventually a family. Isabella felt as if she were in a surreal dream. You're talking about a marriage of convenience. I'm talking about a marriage that benefits both parties, corrected Dominic. Convenience is too cold a word for something that could be much more. And if I refuse? Dominic turned to face her, and Isabella saw something in his eyes that made her step back. Then you'll discover that refusing isn't really an option. Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. Isabella, you know things about me that could cause significant problems. You've become a liability that needs to be managed. Isabella felt panic growing in her chest. So my options are to marry you or die. Your options are to marry me and live a life of luxury and security, or refuse and discover that the world can be a very dangerous place for you and your family. The veiled threat made Isabella feel sick. Would you hurt my family? I would protect my family, replied Dominic. And once you marry me, your family becomes my family. They'll be under my protection forever. Isabella walked to the windows, trying to process what was happening. Below, Las Vegas pulsed with life and energy. Millions of people living their lives without knowing that decisions like this were being made on the upper floors of the buildings that dominated the horizon. How much time do I have to decide? She asked. Until tomorrow night. Isabella turned to look at him. That's impossible. I can't make such an important decision in so little time." "You can and you will," said Dominic, his voice taking on a tone of authority that brooked no discussion. "Isabella, I'm going to be very clear with you. This offer has an expiration date. After tomorrow night, it expires, and you'll discover that my alternatives are much less generous." Isabella looked again at the documents on the desk. The check, the acceptance letters, all the promises of a better life for her family. It was everything she had wished for, but the price was her freedom, her autonomy, her ability to choose her own destiny. "And if I agree," she said slowly, "what would this marriage be like? Would you expect me to... "I would expect you to be my wife in every sense of the word," replied Dominic, approaching her. "But I'm not a monster, Isabella. I wouldn't force anything you weren't willing to give. Still, it would be a gilded cage. It would be a partnership, one that could become much more if you allowed it." Isabella could feel the heat of Dominic's body when he stopped behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "Think about your family, Isabella," he whispered. "Think about Diego at MIT, fulfilling his dreams. Think about your mother receiving the best medical care. Think about yourself, never having to worry about the money again, never having to work double shifts just to survive." Isabella closed her eyes, feeling tears roll down her cheeks. "Why me? Why not find someone who really wants this? Because you're special, Isabella. You have something that can't be bought or manufactured, genuine integrity. And because," he hesitated, "because from the moment I saw you, I knew you would be mine." Isabella pulled away from his touch and turned to face him. "And if I say yes, what would the ceremony be like? Where would we live?" "Civil marriage on Friday, followed by a religious ceremony on Saturday if you want. You would move to my house, a private property in the hills with complete security. Your family would be relocated to a better house, also with protection. Protection or surveillance?" "Both," admitted Dominic. "In my world, the two things are often the same." Isabella walked back to the desk and picked up the documents again, studying them as if they could reveal a third option she had missed. "I need to go home," she said finally. "I need to think." "Of course. My driver will take you." As Isabella headed for the door, Dominic called her. "Isabella!" She turned around. "Remember that sometimes the best decisions are those we make with our hearts, not just our minds." Isabella nodded and left the office. But as the elevator descended, she wondered if Dominic Romano had enough heart to understand the difference. During the ride home, Isabella looked out the car window and saw her life passing like a movie. She thought about her father, his principles, everything he had taught about doing the right thing. But she also thought about her mother, working despite the pain, and Diego, brilliant and full of potential, but limited by circumstances. When she arrived home, Isabella found her family watching television in the living room. They seemed so normal, so innocent of the dangers that now surrounded them. How could she tell them that their lives depended on a decision she would have to make in the next 24 hours? "How was work, mija?" asked Carmen. "Different," replied Isabella, kissing her mother's forehead. "Very different." As she went up to her room, Isabella knew the night would be long. She had until tomorrow night to decide whether to sell her soul to save her family, or find the courage to face the consequences of refusing Dominic Romano. What she didn't know was that Dominic had already taken steps to ensure her decision would be the right one, because in Dominic Romano's world, some things were too important to be left to chance, and Isabella Martinez had become the most important thing in his life. Isabella spent the night awake, pacing her small room like a caged beast. With each passing hour, the weight of the decision she needed to make became more crushing. She had put the documents Dominic had given her in a drawer, but she could feel them there, as if they radiated an energy she couldn't ignore. At 5 a.m, she gave up trying to sleep and went down to the kitchen to make coffee. She found her mother already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a worried expression. "Couldn't sleep either?" asked Carmen, looking at her daughter's red and swollen eyes. Isabella served herself coffee and sat next to her mother. "Mama, if you had to choose between your happiness and the family's safety, what would you do?" Carmen studied her daughter's face with maternal attention. "Bella, what kind of question is that? Are you in trouble?" It's hypothetical, Isabella lied. Just something I've been thinking about. Well, said Carmen slowly, your father always said family comes first. But he also said that sacrifices made with resentment poison the soul. Why are you asking this? Before Isabella could answer, Diego came downstairs, already dressed for school, and with an energy that contrasted dramatically with the somber mood of the women in the family. Good morning, family, he said cheerfully, kissing his mother's forehead and stealing a piece of toast from Isabella's plate. Bella, you look terrible. Are you sick? Thanks for the compliment, replied Isabella dryly. Seriously, are you okay? You've been strange lately. Isabella forced a smile. Just tired from work. Nothing a little rest won't solve. Diego studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Well, I have news that will cheer you up. Remember the MIT scholarship I mentioned? The counselor said there's a real chance I could get it. Apparently someone recommended my case to the admissions committee. Isabella felt her stomach contract. Someone? Who? I don't know. The counselor said it was an anonymous donor who saw my academic record. Incredible, isn't it? Isabella exchanged glances with her mother, who seemed confused by the coincidence. Very incredible, murmured Isabella. After Diego left for school, Carmen turned to her daughter with a serious expression. Isabella, what's happening? And don't tell me it's nothing. I've known you since you were born. Isabella fought against the impulse to tell everything to her mother. Carmen Martinez was a strong woman, but she had been through so much in recent years. Her husband's death, health problems, financial difficulties. How could Isabella add the weight of knowing that the family was being threatened by a Mafia member? Mama, if I had an opportunity to solve all our financial problems, but it meant doing something you might not approve of, what would you say? Carmen took her daughter's hands in hers. I would say that no money is worth compromising who you are, mija. Your father and I didn't raise you to take moral shortcuts. Even if it meant Diego could go to MIT, that you could have the best medical care, that we would never have to worry about money again? Especially then, replied Carmen firmly. Bella, what's happening? You're scaring me. Isabella kissed her mother's hand. I'm just thinking about the future, Mama. Trying to find a way to give this family the life it deserves. Carmen studied her for a long moment. Remember, mija, sometimes the price of what we want is greater than we can pay, and sometimes what we think we want isn't really what we need. Isabella spent the day working at the cafe, but her mind was completely elsewhere. Eduardo noticed her distraction and dismissed her early again, suggesting she see a doctor if she didn't feel better. At 4 p.m, Isabella was driving aimlessly through the streets of Las Vegas when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Miss Martinez? This is Dr. Harrison from Sunrise Medical Center. I'm calling about your mother. Isabella's heart stopped. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, don't worry. But we received some test results she had done last week, and I'd like to discuss them with you. Would it be possible to come today? Isabella felt a wave of panic. Her mother had mentioned a routine appointment, but hadn't said anything about tests. What kind of results? I prefer to discuss in person. What time would be convenient? Isabella looked at the clock. It was 4:15, and she had until tonight to give her answer to Dominic. I can be there in an hour. Perfect. I'll be waiting. Isabella called her mother and asked to meet her at the hospital, making up an excuse about a follow-up appointment. As she drove to Sunrise Medical Center, her mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if her mother was sick? What if she needed expensive treatment they couldn't afford? When she arrived at the hospital, Isabella found her mother in the waiting room, looking small and fragile in the blue plastic chairs. Bella, what's happening? The doctor wouldn't tell me anything over the phone. I don't know, Mama. Let's find out together. Dr. Harrison was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a gentle expression that couldn't completely hide his concern. He led them to his office and asked them to sit down. Mrs. Martinez, he began, the tests we did last week showed some irregularities that concern me. Isabella felt her mother tense beside her. What kind of irregularities? There are indications that you may be developing a serious heart problem. We need to do more tests to confirm. But if my suspicions are correct, you're going to need surgery. Isabella's world seemed to stop. What kind of surgery? Valve replacement. It's a complex procedure. but with a high success rate when done by experienced specialists. Carmen found her voice. And the cost? Dr. Harrison hesitated. With insurance, it would still be a substantial amount. Without insurance, he paused. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Isabella felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. They could barely pay basic bills, let alone heart surgery. How much time do we have? Asked Isabella. If the tests confirm my suspicions, I would recommend surgery within 6 months, maybe less, depending on progression. After scheduling additional tests and receiving a list of specialists, Isabella and Carmen left the hospital in silence. It was only when they reached the parking lot that Carmen finally spoke. Bella, I don't want you to worry about this. We'll find a way. How, Mama? How are we going to find hundreds of thousands of dollars? Carmen hugged her daughter. God will provide, Mika. He always provides. But as she drove her mother home, Isabella knew that God had just given her the answer to her decision. There was no longer a choice to be made. Dominic Romano had perfectly orchestrated the situation, and now she was cornered. At 7 in the evening, Isabella was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing the same navy blue dress she had worn to dinner. She had applied makeup to hide the signs that she had been crying, but her eyes still reflected the pain of the decision she was about to make. She went downstairs and found her family watching television in the living room. Diego was doing homework on the floor, and Carmen was knitting, an activity that always calmed her when she was worried. I'm going out for a few hours, announced Isabella. Work again? Asked Diego without looking up from his books. Something like that. Carmen looked at her daughter attentively. Are you okay, Mija? You look different. Isabella kissed her mother's forehead. I'm fine. Just taking care of some business. As she drove to Dominic's office, Isabella thought about all the ways her life could have been different. If her father hadn't died, if she had been born into a wealthy family, if she had never heard that conversation at the casino. But there was no point in lamenting what couldn't be changed. Now she had to deal with reality, and reality was that her family needed her to make a sacrifice she had never imagined having to make. Dominic's office was lit when she arrived, and he was waiting for her at the elevator reception. He was dressed in a dark suit that made him look even more imposing, and there was an expression in his eyes that suggested he already knew what her answer would be. Isabella, he said, offering his arm. Thank you for coming. I had no choice, she replied, accepting his arm. There are always choices. Some are just harder than others. They went up to the office in silence, and Isabella noticed there were other people waiting. A man she recognized as a local judge, a woman who appeared to be a clerk, and Anthony Torino, who was standing near the windows with a serious expression. You already knew, said Isabella, realizing that Dominic had prepared for her answer. I hoped, he corrected. But I wasn't sure until I saw your expression when you entered. Isabella looked around the room, realizing that everything was prepared for a civil wedding ceremony. There were even flowers, white roses in a crystal vase on Dominic's desk. Today's medical appointment, she said. You orchestrated that too. Dominic looked at her with an expression that could have been remorse. Your mother really needs the surgery, Isabella. I just made sure you knew about it in time. You're a monster. I'm a man who gets what he wants, and I want you. Isabella stepped away from him and walked to the windows, looking at the city below. Somewhere in those lights, her family was living their normal lives, not knowing that everything was about to change. If I do this, she said without turning around, I want guarantees. What kind of guarantees? My family will never be hurt. Diego goes to MIT. My mother gets the best heart surgery available, and I want this in writing. Of course. Isabella turned to face him. And I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. Your business, your activities, everything. Dominic hesitated. Some things are better not to know. No. If I'm going to be your wife, if I'm going to be part of your world, then I want to know the truth. All of it. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But remember, Isabella, knowledge has a price. Once you know certain things, there's no going back. There's already no going back. Dominic approached her, stopping so close that Isabella could feel the heat of his body. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you say yes, You'll be my wife in every sense of the word." Isabella looked into his gray-blue eyes and saw something she didn't expect: vulnerability. For a moment, Dominic Romano didn't look like the powerful mafia boss, but just a man who wanted something he couldn't buy or take by force. "I accept," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. The smile that spread across Dominic's face was genuine and transformative. "Then let's get married." The ceremony was brief and surreal. Isabella heard herself repeating vows that meant nothing to her, promising to love and honor a man who had essentially blackmailed her into marrying him. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Dominic kissed her gently, and Isabella felt a confusion of emotions she wasn't prepared to process. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Romano," said Anthony Torino, being the first to congratulate her after the ceremony. "Mrs. Romano." Isabella tested the name mentally and found it sounded strange and frightening. "There's one thing I need to do before we go home," said Dominic after the judge and clerk left. "What?" Dominic picked up his phone and made a call. "Yes, it's done. You can proceed with the transfers." Isabella realized he was activating the payments he had promised. The money for her mother, the scholarships, all the benefits that had sealed her fate. "Now it's official," he said, hanging up the phone. "Your family is under my protection, and you are my wife." Isabella nodded, feeling strangely empty. She had saved her family, but at what cost? She had sold her freedom, her autonomy, her ability to choose her own destiny. "Let's go home," said Dominic, offering his arm again. "Home," repeated Isabella, knowing she would never see her real home the same way again. As they left the office, Isabella looked one last time out the window at the city below. Somewhere in those lights, her old life was ending and a new one was beginning. She was now Isabella Romano, wife of one of the most powerful and dangerous men in Las Vegas. And as the elevator descended, taking her away from the woman she had been and toward the woman she would be forced to become, Isabella wondered if she would ever be able to forgive herself for what she had done. What she didn't know was that Dominic Romano had fallen in love with her the moment he first saw her, and that he was willing to do anything, including emotional blackmail, to have her. But love built on coercion is an unstable foundation, and Isabella would soon discover that even in Dominic Romano's golden world, some prisons are more dangerous than others. As the limousine took them through the illuminated streets of Las Vegas toward Isabella's new life, neither of them knew that their story was just beginning. Because in Dominic Romano's world, getting married was just the first move in a much more complex and dangerous game. And Isabella Martinez Romano was about to discover that surviving as a mafia boss's wife would require all the strength, intelligence, and courage she possessed, and perhaps more than that.